Our relentless focus on the travesty of justice in the Bilkis Bano case continues. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo story. Let's take you through the key developments of what has happened on this particular case today. Now, we have tracked down all of the key protagonists, and there have been some very, very strong statements. The judge who first convicted these 11 men called it a revolt against the judicial apparatus, a legal gimmick. Another judge, Justice Deepak Gupta of the Supreme Court, actually said that the decision to release these 11 men is immoral, unjust, and unfair. So, those are the two key judges who have been involved in this case. Justice Gupta was the one who awarded Bilkis Bano 50 lakhs in compensation. Meanwhile, Mojo Story exposed the BJP MLA who was on the panel that recommended the release of these 11 convicts. He described these men to be Brahmins, men of good sanskars. Those comments are now being quoted globally and have sparked outrage. The Nirbhaya case was a pivotal moment in India's conversation around sexual violence, and her mother is asking, "Itne sanskari the, bhai to rape kyun kiya?" Lashing out at those comments by the BJP legislator. But will all of this outrage, will the condemnation from the two critical judges who were involved in the conviction and the compensation of the rapists lead to change? Well, we're not giving up. We have started a petition in collaboration with change.org. We're asking women to raise hell. We're asking women to raise hell. And finally, let us introduce our guest on the program today, who has both a personal story and a long body of work that has actually examined rape culture. I'm talking, of course, about Sohaila Abdulali, whose seminal work, What We Talk About When We Talk About Rape, is one of the most important books that has been written on sexual violence and gender justice. And she is a rape survivor herself, but has also spent a large part of her professional and literary life looking at sexual violence. So let's go across to Sohaila, who is, of course, based out of the United States of America. Thank you, Sohaila. A lot of people are speaking up and speaking out, including the judges who put away these rapists in the Bilkis Bano case, the judges who awarded her exemplary compensation in 2019. We are ourselves running a campaign saying, let's raise hell, we've got to make noise. But I want to start by asking you, or rather sharing with you a little story that Bilkis Bano's lawyer, Shobha Gupta, told me. She said to me that there was another rape survivor, not Bilkis Bano. And when that rape survivor saw what had happened with Bilkis and saw that these men were out of prison, they were being greeted with sweets and with garlands, that they weren't just being released, they were being celebrated, and those pictures tell their own story. Shobha said that this other rape survivor then said that I don't think there's any point by fighting. Because if this is what's going to happen eventually, then what is the purpose of actually going to court? So I'm just wondering, as somebody who, you know, you were 17 when you were assaulted, when you were gang raped. Bilkis was just a couple of years older than you, 2 years older than you, 19 when I met her in a relief camp in Godhra. Did you look at it and say, oh my God, the system is so cruel, this is going to set back the fight for women against sexual violence by I don't know how many years if something doesn't change? Hang on, you're on mute.
Every
Yeah, go
time
ahead.
sorry,
Yeah, go ahead.
every time something like this happens, first of all, hi Barkha, thank you for
Hi,
having me on your
hi.
show. Every time something like this happens, and this is a particularly heinous incident, I have this weird mixture, and I'm sure many people share it, of utter outrage and utter sort of tedium, like here we go again. But I
Yeah,
feel like if we, yes, I would feel like giving up if I felt like we're fighting the right fight. But I feel almost like we haven't found the right fight yet, and we are fighting to find the fight. For instance, your campaign to put the rapist back in jail is fantastic, and that's great. But think about the fact that our justice system is completely broken. So if we only look at that system for justice, in a way, we'll never get it. Yes, we have to do it, but we have to transform our whole system. I mean, here is a case of people who are convicted. They're rapists, they're murderers. There's no question they did the crime. But we have a system where they could easily have been completely innocent people. If she had been an upper caste woman and they had been
Hmm.
lower caste men, she could have accused anyone and who knows what would have happened. So I feel like, yes, sometimes it feels hopeless, but it also feels hopeless because we're trying to do the impossible and fix a hopeless system. Part of me feels like what we need to do is just break it from the ground up and start again. And that
How do you break something that's already broken?
well, for one thing, we have to decide it's broken. I mean, here we have a country of people. Remember when Jyoti Singh happened? I like to call her Jyoti Singh and not Nirbhaya because
Oh, by the way, her mother, Asha Devi, keeps saying, please call her Jyoti Singh. And the only reason that we in the media fall back on Nirbhaya is because that is how she is recognized. So if you want to talk about that case, or imagine if we say Jyoti Singh, people will look at you blankly. And we'll talk in a little bit about this sort of not taking the rape survivor's name, but do go on. Yes.
yeah, so exactly. So I like to call her Jyoti Singh because for one thing, her mother asked for it, and for another, Nirbhaya means the brave one. And again, we're putting our assumptions on this person. She has no fault because she is dead, and but someone like Bilkis Bano or me, even though there's very little comparison between us, something's wrong with us because we survived this. And if we were true good women, we'd have just died quietly and been the brave ones. So I
Hmm.
feel like, yes, how do you fix something that's broken? First, you acknowledge it's broken. We all have to realize that, we're looking for justice in places that won't really give them to us because the bottom line is that no one deep down inside believes that it's such a big deal that you get raped. And if it's not such a big deal, why are you making such a fuss? Or it's such a big deal that you should really be dead and there's no use doing something to the rapist. Now, I feel like Bilkis Bano's case is very, very different from mine because that's a case of murder. I mean, I did not lose 17 members of my family, including my child. So, again, we call them rapists, which they are, and that's a serious crime. But we need to also call them murderers because
Hmm.
that's what they are. So, we have this funny way of confusing matters by elevating rape and at the same time burying it. And I think maybe the first thing we need to do is start acknowledging that we're very murky in the way we think about it.
Yeah, you say there's nothing in common with what happened to you and what happened to Bilkis. But let me tell you a few things that sort of strike me as common. One is how young both of you were. I mean, something happens to you at 17, something happens to you at 19. It can actually transform fundamentally how you view life, how you view yourself, how you view relationships, literally everything, right? And the other is both of you did not hide behind a veil of a given name, of a foisted name, of a silhouette, a darkened silhouette. You didn't do that. In fact, in article after article, given what happened to you, a gang rape at 17 in Mumbai, you're called one of India's earliest survivors to actually identify herself and go public. And Bilkis, you and me are women of relative privilege. Bilkis is a poor woman from Gujarat who was raped by men who used to buy milk from her house. So of course there are differences, but there are also commonalities, aren't there?
Very much. I absolutely relate to her in many ways, but I think the reason why I feel the need to say we're different is because it feels really presumptuous for me to kind of equate my suffering with hers. Because while I was, I even have a chapter in my book that says my rape, your rape was worse than mine, and I talk about how damaging it is for us to rank rape. But in this instance, I really feel like for me to say that we've gone through the same thing and suffered the same thing is really presumptuous when I'm sitting here in New York perfectly safe and she is still fighting her fight. That's what I meant. But in terms of how we reacted and how we were open about our names, absolutely. And I salute her because I feel I don't know what her background and what she was taught, but to me, it wasn't a choice I made. It just never occurred to me to hide my name. No one ever told me that if someone commits a crime to you, you're the perpetrator. It that message just went over my head.
Yeah.
So it was never
Let's
something I thought about.
What is the idea of justice? And of course it is different for everybody. What was the idea of justice for you when four men rape you? And I apologize because I know every time I bring this up, it can't ever be easy to talk about it, even though you've written about it extensively. But it's important to talk about rape, as you yourself have pointed out. And When you think of yourself as that 17-year-old gang raped, and you think of justice, did your idea of what justice is change over time, or did it remain the same? And did you feel you got justice?
Several questions. So one thing is interestingly enough, it's now 40 years later, more, and my idea hasn't changed. I feel like there are two kinds of justice that I knew instantly that I wanted then, and that I feel all survivors deserve now. One is personal justice. I just wanted my life back. I just wanted to go back to being a happy person, about to go to college, feeling like generally the world is a reasonable place that would treat me fairly. That's individual justice, whatever that took, whether it took them going to jail, whether it took my parents saying, carry on, we think you're fantastic, whatever. And then there's another form of justice, because I was really worried that they would do it to someone else. They told me they would. And I was worried that they would A, kill me, and B, find me, and C, do to someone else. So there's these two. And I think one of the interesting things, especially about rape, is that the two don't always match. And we have to be really careful. And again, in this reminds me of what the lawyer said. Bilkis's lawyer told you that she does not want to go back to court, because one of the things we do is, in order to get justice, we put all the onus on the survivor. She's Because this has happened to her, him, them, whoever, they're supposed to go fight the fight, whereas rape is actually a crime against the state. Let the state fight the fight and do it. So I felt very much like, yes, I want something to happen to them, but for me to, in order to take, even bring charges against my rapist, which now I realize wouldn't have done any good anyway. I was 17, I was a minor. The police first didn't believe me, and second said that if I was going to file a suit, I would have to be locked up in the remand home near my house and miss college, miss going to the States, miss my family, be locked up. So how is that? How would that lead to justice for me? So I feel like I got justice in my own life, in the sense that I went on and I made it. I found my joy again. I lived a life. But in terms of justice for them, no, they went free. There's a little note somewhere in the Chembur police station saying that I lied about being raped, because the police would not leave my house until I told them that there was nothing had happened. So that does not feel like justice. And for her, I feel like there's, both those justices meet, the individual and the community justice. Those people have to be put away where they can't get to her, otherwise there's no justice.
But the men who did this to you are free, and the men who did this to Bilkis are also free currently
Yes,
and presently, right? I mean,
yes,
that just leaps out to me as a staggering sort
yes,
of moment there, right? In her case, in your case, you couldn't even begin to battle the legal system to start the process of
right.
justice, right? So basically, you found an unempathetic police, and you sort of walked away from it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess I was pushed away from it, because it was
You
either shut up or be locked up, and that was my choice. In her case, I'm amazed at her bravery and her courage, that she held it together for this whole court case, and that in a country where really there's systemic corruption and communality and everything, it even got so far that they went to jail. And it's sort of horrifying and yet unsurprising that this is the end of it. It's awful.
and in her case, she actually fights, till 2019 in the courts of India. 17 years, changes home 20 times. And one of the things her husband Yaqub says to me this past week, is अभी तो जीना शुरू करा था दोबारा. We had just started living. So, when you
Ah,
said I got my life back, I started
right.
living. I think Bilkis was at that point, or Bilkis and her family were at that point when they thought, okay, maybe now is that time when we can resume the business of living. And then, you know, they see the men who raped her mother, her two sisters, killed her daughter Saleha, smashing her head with a stone. She lost 14 members of her family. They're out, and the family is scared. And Yaqub tells me that Bilkis is silent. वो मायूस है, बहुत दिन से कुछ बोली नहीं. She's numb. What were the different phases of emotion that you went through? Was there isolation, grief, rage, loneliness? Just blocking it all out?
Well, I think that in a way, saying blocking it all out, we have this, there's this sort of standard theory of trauma recovery where you have, and I don't know what they are, but one of the stages is denial. And I've always had a bit of an issue with that because what is denial? I think that we know what we need to do to survive. And sometimes what we need to do is push it to the back. And that might not be denial. It's actually a form of survival. For me, I was unlucky in what happened to me, but I was very lucky in the kind of support I had afterwards. For one thing, I was really young. I would guess maybe emotionally even younger than Bilkis was. She had a life. She had been married. She had a child. I had been really sheltered my whole life, totally supported. No one, like I said, no one gave me the clue. No one gave me the memo that I'm supposed to feel bad about this. And in a way, that really helped me. 3 weeks afterwards, I was still injured, but I went to America. I went to college, and it was easy to convince myself that this was an aberration that had happened in another place and it was over. It took me years to realize that this is actually a normal thing and part of society and part of gender relations. So I was kind of happy living in my dream world for a while until it dawned on me that I could write a piece and everybody would jump down my throat. So for me, it was a relief at getting back to life. It was euphoria that they didn't kill me. And then a couple of years later, a huge shock when I started. I had nightmares and all that stuff in the beginning, but I would wake up every morning and feel better. But it was a huge shock to realize that it's everywhere. There was a famous rape case. There was a case in Boston when I was there where this woman was raped on the pool table. And that hit me like a boulder. I suddenly thought it's everywhere. And I thought, well, it's not like a vaccine, right? You get immunized once and then you're free. You're back in the pool of potential victims. So it was shocking. But I think for me, and I hope for Bilkis, being surrounded by people who loved and cared and believed and didn't have all these. Of course, there were many people who said ridiculous things, but I think I was stubborn enough to know that they were ridiculous.
And in your case, do you ever look back and wish? I wrote about this in my first book that when I was at Jamia Millia, I actually was in a relationship briefly that was both sexually and physically abusive.
Right.
And at that time, my faculty advised me, "Oh, don't even bother taking this to court. Nothing will happen. Nothing will come of it." And much has changed since then. And today, I would not advise any other woman to do that. And when you look back at that time of being that 17-year-old who was gang raped, and the police wouldn't listen to you, and the police was unempathetic and hostile. But today, 40 years later, do you regret not having gone through the legal system?
No, not at all. I feel bad that they went free, but I realized that there was absolutely nothing I could have done. I did every single possible thing. Even if they had locked me up, at that time I thought, oh, I'm letting other women down by not letting them do this. But the way the system works, I realize now that no matter what, first of all, we might not have been able to find them. And it was so stacked against me. First, they didn't believe me. And then if I had decided to press charges, who's to say that as a person living in a bungalow, speaking English, wearing jeans, I couldn't have gone out and pointed to any four men and gotten them beaten up? I don't think it would have worked. So I don't regret. I do regret that it worked out like that. I had fantasies of standing up in court and pointing to them, but it would never have happened. So I'm sorry it was that way, but I can't see a single different thing I would do. I think it
Yeah.
would have been very, very traumatizing. And my father, who was there, who said, we'll do whatever you want. When they suggested the remand home, that's when he stood up. He said, she'll just get raped again there. And I'm sure that would have happened.
What do you mean remand home? They wanted to send you to the remand home?
Yes, me. That was
The
the thing. They said, for
who?
my
The
own
police.
safety.
The police.
Yes, they said if you file this FIR, then we consider that you are unsafe, and because you're a minor, we're going to lock you up in the remand home, which I knew about in my house, which was a really dangerous place. So that was my choice, and there was no
So
way my father was letting me go.
Yeah, and as the sort of person who had been wronged and violated, you were being treated as the perpetrator. In Bilkis's case, it's not exactly similar, but when you look at these images of these men being given sweets and Phul Mala Chadhao, Supreme Court Judge Justice Deepak Gupta actually looked at these images. Can we play them, please? And he looked at these images and he said, these men have not just been released; they have in fact been uh, celebrated. And you think of Bilkis Bano looking at these images, and God knows what the hell must she be thinking,
Oh,
because these men have gone back to normal and she is terrified all over again.
yeah, well, this is not. I just want to say one thing about the whole narrative around this whole event. It's become very political, and in many ways, it is political because it does have to do with communalism and the government that's in power right now. That is very true. But that all really blinds us to the fact that this is something that all over the world, whether it's like in Stanford in America or in Godhra in Gujarat, whatever battles men are fighting, women's bodies become the battleground. So forget about BJP, Congress, Stanford, this, that. This is the basic issue, is that there's always something going wrong. There's some battle being fought. And the way they express themselves is through sexually assaulting a woman. And
Yeah.
that is what we have to acknowledge.
And I'll tell you the proof of how entrenched it is and how almost normalized it is the BJP legislator who was on this Gujarat government panel that recommended the release of these men. He was actually with the Congress party till a few years ago. I was struck by
Right.
that fact. But if you listen to him, I'll just play a couple of sentences from his interview to us. You'll see how normal what he's saying is for him, and then we'll come back to exactly your book, what we talk about when we talk about rape. Listen.
Yeah.
क्राइम किया कि नहीं किया हमको पता नहीं है, लेकिन क्राइम के बारे में मैं क्या कोई इंटेंशन भी हो सकता है ना कि जो भूतकाल की जो कार्यवाही है उसके फैमिली के मेंबर के जो कोई एक्टिविटी है वो बहुत अच्छी थी, ब्राह्मण लोग थे और वैसे भी ब्राह्मण के जो कुछ है उसके संस्कार भी बड़ा अच्छा था, इसलिए किसी को मतलब के गुने में डाल के उसको पनिशमेंट करने का बद इरादा भी हो सकता है.
So basically, he's saying they're men of good values, they behaved well in jail, they're Brahmins, or that automatically makes them men of good values, and he's even questioning their guilt. This woman fought for 17 years. Her case, the Supreme Court records show that when the Supreme Court ordered 50 lakhs compensation for her, they recorded the fact that Bilkis Bano was raped 22 times. 22 times, right? This is in the court documents. And this man is sitting in a friendly sort of way, kind of soft spoken, normal way, and saying, बड़े अच्छे आदमी हैं, बड़ा अच्छा behave किया jail में, they were very good in jail, and who knows whether they were even guilty. So that kind of, and I could tell you, I think he's absolutely staggered that his comments have created the furor that they have. And when you've been looking at rape culture, is this one of the things that leaps out? Just how so many misconceptions and so normalized at so many levels, and yet taboo at one level and so normalized at another level.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that doesn't leap out, it kind of crawls out. The thing
Yeah.
is that I know people like him. I'm sure he's a perfectly nice guy. The thing is that he says they're from good families and they have good normal values, because these are normal values. This is rape culture, what we live in. It is normal for guys to be upset and angry and take it out on a woman. So he's not that wrong. It's awful, but he's sort of expressing something that lives in a lot of us, a lot. So, yes, that is what rape culture is. It's like no matter what, you take it out on a woman. That is rape culture. And this business of are they even guilty? That's another thing. It's like, again, I want to compare it with something very different, which is when Chanel Miller was raped by Brock Turner at Stanford, where his family, the whole thing was, well, I didn't do anything. It was just a minute. I was drunk. I was this, I was that. It's no big deal. And so this is when I say we have to fix it from the bottom up. We don't acknowledge that it's even wrong. So this guy, yeah, he's just a normal guy. And to me, that kind of banality, that kind of cluelessness is basically evil in disguise, that doesn't even know it's evil. And believe me, it's not just men that have it. I mean, in my case, some of the most horrifying comments were from women who cared about me, who would say things like, make a joke about it, not,
I mean,
like,
how do you joke
well,
about this?
so many guys at once.
Wow.
Wow. Also, I also, there's a thing that women do where I would tell somebody and they say, oh my God, I would never let that happen to me, poor thing. So how is that supposed to make me feel like I let it happen to me? Which, yes, I did. It was either that or die. So this
Yeah.
guy, I've seen this clip of the interview a million times, and it's awful, but it's good to see it because it is normal. We normalize rape because it is normal. It should not be, but it really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, and that's why actually, while we're all appalled, it's so important that we publicize the fact that this is how people think, because it's our neighbors and people in our extended families that think like this as well. If they're caught off guard, at least some of them, we all have someone, Uncle G, who would talk like this. And as you said, it isn't just men. There is a lot of I always say both misogyny and feminism can be gender agnostic.
Yes.
It really, we're all constant sort of products of a patriarchal culture, and we're constantly renegotiating our relationship with it. In the end, I want to pick up some of the quotes from your own writing. One of the points that you've made is that a lot of times women don't even recognize rape as rape. You obviously did. Can we just take that banner off? Yeah. You said, we really have a problem if we think it's easy to confuse sex with rape. Of course, you're looking at this entire notion of consent, which has come to be such a political conversation in the backdrop of the Me Too movement. And one of the problems, of course, is that we don't talk about rape often enough. We only talk about it in the episodic way. The other point you make is we imagine rapists to be some otherworldly creatures, but you talk about how rape is a choice. It isn't just something that happens in these sort of overwhelming, extreme circumstances. It happens in marriages more often than we care to even talk about. And you say a rapist is just a guy, any guy who rapes, right? And I want you to pick up on some of these comments, Sohaila. When you started to try and go deeper into what is rape culture, what is the thing that leapt out at you and made you even re-examine your own sort of beliefs? Like you've constantly said, we must talk about rape and we must talk about how we talk about rape. So how is it that we talk about rape?
Well, I want to go, there's many things to say, but one of the things is what you said about confusing sex and rape. And I think this goes back to this MLA guy and what he said, that they have normal values. Like, what are normal values?
Not
Say
even normal. He said they have good values.
good
Sanskar
values.
अच्छे हैं.
That's
Good
right,
values.
right. Let's not misquote him.
Yes.
So I think of our country, okay, and the way we talk about, like, my family lived for many years in a tribal village, and when they got married, they'd be young. The boys would be really young. The girls would be really young. They mostly had never met each other, and the night before the wedding, the guy's grandmother would tell him about sex. This was pre-internet, so there was no porn
Yeah.
to watch. They had no idea.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you picture that wedding night. The messages is that the girl is told, lie there, something's going to happen to you. He's told, do this. Now, if that's your version of sex, then
Yeah.
what's so different between that and rape? She has no choice. He's doing this thing. Actually, he probably feels he has no choice either. So that's why I said we're very confused, because the messages we give about sex are really rape messages. In the US, there's this whole thing of losing your virginity is a big deal, but it's going to hurt the first time if you're a girl. But if you're a guy, it's going to be great. So what is that? I mean, there's no pleasure or joy in that equation. So I
Yes.
feel like when we talk about it, we really need to talk about, the first step is to think of men, women, gender neutral people as equal. It's not that sex is not meant to be one thing for one gender and one for the other. It's not, it's not really true that one gender cannot control themselves and that one gender has to suffer. These seem like very bottom of the barrel kind of expectations. So that's what I meant. I found that out is when talking to people, that there's all this confusion about, say, consent. Either you're considered like some kind of prudish grandmother if you want to talk about consent, or it's like, all hang out, let it be, we're just going to feel our way through this.
Yeah.
But seems to me it's very sexy to actually talk about these things. It adds to the pleasure if you feel safe.
I mean, I think the problem also is that we have replaced the kind of puritanical culture that kept sex shrouded with a kind of hypersexualized culture that doesn't do women any favors either, because, you know, your agency either way is so complicated because you're looking at these images on Instagram all the time. You're like, I don't look like this. Do I look sexy
Right.
enough? Do I meet these metrics of beauty, of sexiness? There's so much going on. Am I not cool if I haven't had sex at this age? All of those things. So Ella, I do have to end. I want you to end with the last thought. I go back to Shobha Gupta, Bilkis Bano's lawyer, who says that if these men do not go back to jail, it is going to set back the capacity for the next rape survivor and the next rape survivor to actually fight. As somebody who couldn't fight 40 years ago, 20 years after you, Bilkis Bano did feel she could fight. How critical is this? How critical is this for, I don't know. I mean, everybody's ideas of justice is different. Not every woman will go to court, of course. But for women who choose to fight that fight, I mean, just your last thoughts on this case and what it makes you feel as a survivor today.
Well, I feel that it's critical, but it's also not the critical thing. Whatever happens with this case, here we are in this position where sometimes things go terribly wrong and sometimes there's some semblance of justice. I think my thought is not so much about this case, but about Bilkis, that I hope, I don't know if I'll ever contact, I hope that she does not feel like this is her battle to fight. I hope that she does not feel the weight of the world on her shoulders. It is not up to her. She has fought more than anyone could expect her to do. And whatever happens, she's a hero in this story. Well, I hope that they are punished, but she's the hero no matter what happens to them. She has served all of us by speaking up, by being who she is. And whatever happens in this case is no reflection on her. And I absolutely tip my hat to her.
Thank you, Sohaila Abdulali. I also tip my hat to you, because for every woman who is a survivor of sexual assault and rape, to speak, to write about it, to go public with it, to fight it in your own way is never easy. It doesn't matter how many years pass. The impact of it is sometimes, felt in ways that we don't even fully comprehend. It can take lifetimes to actually understand. You may feel you're completely unaltered, and yet you don't know. Ask the people who know you and love you, and I'm sure many different answers will emerge. Thank you, Sohaila. Take care, and look forward to, in a way, learning more from you and your writings, what we talk about when we talk about rape. Thanks, and take care.
Thank you, Barkha. See you.
Thank you. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.